Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar today on alternative proteins, the regulatory future of cultured meats, organized by SGInnovate. My name is Brian, and for those of you who don't know about us, we are a government-backed investor in Singapore with the mission to build deep tech innovations in AI, healthcare, food tech, agri-tech, and more. At SGInnovate, our work involves connecting with the global deep tech ecosystem, working with entrepreneurial scientists to bring their innovative research from lab to market, as well as developing deep tech talent. Today, we have an amazing panel of speakers who will be sharing their knowledge on the alternative protein space. I would like to encourage our audience here today to share their thoughts with us on this topic and engage with our speakers by using the Q&A box below. And now, with no further ado, I will now pass the time to our moderator for today, Kelvin, who will get us started. Kelvin, please.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, SGInnovate, for inviting all of us to this panel. Really excited to have with us a very esteemed group of friends, actually, who will share their insights about this very, very fascinating topic about the regulatory future of cultured meats. So we're going to first start with introductions. As the host, I get to ask the interesting questions as well. And please do ask your questions and we'll make sure we'll answer them as much as we can towards the end of this session. So I'll start in no particular order, but obviously I will start with Myrta. She's the only lady in this panel. So Myrta, we'd like to do a short introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Kelvin, and thanks SGInnovate for having me here. My name is Myrta. I am the acting managing director for the Good Food Institute here in Asia Pacific. I joined GFI December 2019, so not that long ago. For those who don't know the Good Food Institute, I'll give a short introduction. So we are a nonprofit. We started out 5 years ago in America. We're currently active in Brazil, Israel, India, Asia Pacific, and Europe. And actually the sole reason of our existence is to accelerate the markets for plant-based and cultivated meat, dairy, and eggs. And we do that, our work evolves around three operational pillars. We work with governments, we work with corporates, and we work with scientists. In like our science department, we focus on pinpointing the biggest knowledge gaps and try then to bring in the money and the talent to fix those knowledge gaps. With corporates, we work on like scaling up and driving innovation and investments. And with governments, we work to make sure there's more public funding available for open access R&D for alternative proteins, and also working on a level playing field with regards to, for example, labels and label censorship. So that's in a nutshell what we do. And I'm very grateful to be here today.
Thank you, Myrta. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I knew Myrta since you arrived, actually, not too long ago, and it was really cool that you reached out to Green Monday. So really great to be acquainted with you. And next we have Saurabh. Saurabh is from the CEO of Just Asia Pacific. Saurabh, would you like to do your introduction, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Saurabh. I'm the CEO of Just Asia. I've been in the food sector for a little over a decade. So far, I've been focusing predominantly on the traditional foods, but for the last 1 odd year, or maybe slightly more, 2 odd years, have been increasingly focused on the new age foods that are coming up, all around the alternative meats and the vegan ways of healthier and better foods that are coming up now.
Thank you, Saurabh. Saurabh, you're based in Singapore as well, aren't you?
That's right, it's based in Singapore.
Great, thanks, Saurabh. And I think Professor Benjamin Smith, everyone knows you, and you're no stranger to the community, but anything interesting you would like to share with us about yourself?
Yeah, I don't know how much of a stranger I am or not, but for those of you do know me, hello. For those of you you don't, hello as well. I'm very pleased to be here with a great group of people to talk about this subject. My interest in the space, as many of you know, is very much from the how do we bring these types of products to market, and very much from a food safety background, regulatory science background, because that's where my interest and work falls. And so I'm involved with the newly formed Future Ready Food Safety Hub under the Singapore Food Story, which is aimed very much at looking at the science support behind bringing new and novel proteins like cultured meat to market. And so I think a lot of really interesting things being done by many companies, small and big, in this space, and a lot of important things being done to address the food security needs. And so I'm looking to do my part and help out people where we can in bringing these types of products to market.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, and then a little bit about myself. So my name is Kelvin. I'm based in Singapore as well. And I work for a company called Green Monday. And Green Monday is basically a movement and advocacy to encourage consumers, corporations, anybody in particular, to go plant-based or alternative protein once a week. So that's kind of the concept, just step by step, adopting a more sustainable diet, and through your diet, having an impact on climate change and other factors as well, better for you, healthier, and also feel-good factors like not harming animals in the process of consuming your meal. So that's Green Monday. We are headquartered in Hong Kong, founded in 2012. And in 2015, we started what we call the Apple Store of alternative proteins, and that's Green Common, where I'm actually speaking to all of you. And we opened the first Green Common actually in Vivo City on the 19th of January 2021. So it's only 2 months away, and we're really fortunate to be situated in a very cool part of town where we can see the beautiful sea as we consume our sustainable and our environmentally friendly foods that we are familiar with. So that's enough about me. So we'll jump straight into the panel. So I've prepared a couple of questions, and again, would encourage our audience to type in your questions so that we can answer them as well. So, so the first question that I have, and actually I noticed that there was a question that just came in on the same topic, which is around the regulatory frameworks. So the question is, what are the regulatory frameworks for cell-based food and its implications on ASEAN? You could talk a little bit about the HSA codes. What are the codes that are applicable in this space? If you'd like to share those as well, that'd be really appreciated. So I would start with Sarab. Sarab, would you mind kicking off this first question?
Sure. So I think as far as Singapore is concerned, I would perhaps take this broader than just restricting this to SFA. I think if we look at the broader ecosystem, clearly Singapore is head and shoulders above all other countries as far as this space is concerned. We became the first country in the world to approve the sale of cultured chicken. And fortunately for us at Just, we were the company that received that approval. I think all the agencies played a key role in this, whether it was SFA at the forefront or other agencies which have been closely working with us and have rolled out a red carpet to Just. As far as SFA is concerned, as we all know, SFA is a relatively newer agency. It was formed sometime in first half of 2019. But since then, it has done a lot of work, we feel, as at Just. We see that SFA formed this novel food safety working group. Then maybe not really SFA, but A-Star recently formed a Center of Innovation, Crisp Meats, to focus on the space. So there has been a lot of work that has been going on in the broader ecosystem, whether at SFA or beyond. SFA also entered into a memorandum of understanding with Australia and New Zealand sometime in the first half of 2020. So all of those things are helping us and the broader food sector in terms of how to penetrate this market.
Thank you, Sarah. And Yes, Myrta. Yes, of course, Myrta.
Yeah, if I could add, so I think what Singapore has done brilliantly is that it's a very clear process. I mean, there's a single point of entry, which is SFA. They very clearly state on their website, please, if you're interested in launching a cultivated meat product in Singapore, talk to us as early as you can in the process. And then they basically try and well, answer most of the questions basically before the official submission. And then once the official submission is in, it only takes them 3 to 6 months to give the final approval or not. And the process is also free of charge, which is, like, compared to the rest of the world, we see timelines of mostly 18 months, and it could cost you $100,000 US to do this. So I think Singapore is yeah, amazing example of how things should be done. And I think a lot of other governments around the world can learn from Singapore. I think it's very important to have like this clarity of what, like also pre-market safety assessments, like what needs to be reported on, needs to be very clear. Yeah, I think Singapore is a great example of this.
Thank you. So we've got two very strong examples of why you know, cell-based cultured meat companies should all come to Singapore and set up office here in Singapore because of the support given by SFA and free. I mean, you know, there are some things in life that are free, so this is one of those. So it's really cool to have Saurabh yourself share that experience about Just and having been the first, and obviously Myrta from the Good Food Institute, because you have a more broader perspective, right? And you can see the support that the government has provided for this space. How about you, Ben? What do you think about regulatory in this area?
Sure, and I mirror what has been said and have to take my hat off to the Singapore Food Agency for all of the work and the way that they're taking it forward. I think that I'm not going to go into costs and things. To be honest, all of this sort of testing and bringing a product to market will cost you something, because you need to still develop the tests and the data that has to go to the Singapore Food Agency. But I think when you start looking in this space at frameworks and needs, it's a rapidly evolving space. A lot of different products and things are coming to market, new learnings both in how we make or produce these types of foods, as well as how we assess them for safety. And what I think has really moved the bar forward in the regulatory space, and where SFA are leading, but also with their discussions with other partners like FSANZ and developing things like the MOU, is that they're open to this dialogue. They're having the discussion. They're looking at the information that's coming in, and they're building it around a general framework, which for those of you that have seen and looked at it, is a framework that is similar to how you would assess other food ingredients, but they are using the data and the discussions and the interactions with industry to learn and make sure that the products that they're bringing to market are safe. And it's because of that two-way dialogue, because of the communication and the working together, that I think we're seeing, particularly here in Asia, this increase in interest to bring products through to market, because we have a little bit of that flexibility. One, in part because of we're not as maybe as in-ground in our ways as, say, Europe or the US are with their more with their regulatory environments. But two, I think very much, as I said, taking my hat off to the SFA in the openness and the understanding that they have taken of learning about these new products, so that they can actually put the right frameworks and systems in place to bring products to market.
Yeah, well, you said it very well, Ben. I think you're right about that. You know, being able to keep options open and not just, you know, putting your blinkers on and saying, you know, nope. It's great to see that happening in our backyard, and I really can't wait to see it being commercially available in our supermarkets and in our restaurants. as soon as possible. So we've got a couple of questions coming on, and the next question is around awareness, around how do you tell the story to consumers, and you know, how are consumers reacting to cultured meats, and do you pay particular attention to any attributes that you know, add value to that communication, or do you try and downplay certain attributes? What has been the strategy right now for a lot of these cultured meat companies trying to bring these products out into the market? We'll shuffle it around a bit. Maybe we'll start with Benjamin, if you could.
Sure. I think one of the key things, and one of the things that we're seeing also as part of the Singapore food story, and where we're putting a lot of effort, is very much, again, it goes to the communication and dialogue, and this aspect of what I would term risk communication, coming from a safety perspective. But I think the key thing that we're seeing in this space is that the companies are developing a product based on changing consumer values. So they're listening to the consumers, and equally they're talking back to the consumers and saying, okay, how do we make what you want? And how do we understand what are the reasons and things around this that you may want to eat or not eat our products? And I think that it's key to understand these drivers that are opening up this space, but understanding that for some people, some of the drivers like sustainability, the environment, may be the reason. For other people, it may be something purely different. They just like vegetarian, they see it as maybe a healthier option, or for the plant-based type products, or for cell cultured meat, it could simply be animal welfare issues. So there are a whole lot of different issues here that different people have that may dictate what their reasons are behind the choice of these products. And so it's really having the right message and understanding the variation in the consumer space and being very clear on the messages. I think that thinking from a safety perspective and from a regulatory perspective, I think that also it's very important to understand the consumer's perceptions and needs around this and see how it's different. In Europe, for instance, there's a lot of pressure on showing that these new products are of sufficient nutritional status as, say, slaughtered meat. They really have this big push on substantive equivalence. Some of the things that we're discussing here are more on, do you need to have all of those high marks? Why not look at the other benefits? And we're starting to see a shift from more the risk safety SOL assessment to risk benefit assessment. How do you take into account multi-decision factors like the environment, like the economy and jobs that this can open up and things in bringing these products to market. So I think there are many factors. Yeah,
consumers are very fickle too. I've learned it the hard way in my years of experience in the F&B world. What works today may not work tomorrow, so you need to be able to adapt, right, and be relevant. And being in Singapore doesn't mean that whatever works in Singapore will work across the causeway in Malaysia. So you need to also be able to adjust your offering and communicate accordingly to the local cultures.
Sure.
Myrta, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We did back in 2018, so it's a little bit outdated already, but a research into consumer insights for cultivated meat acceptance, and we did a sample of a little bit over 3,000 surveys, like under US, India, and China. And it's interesting to see that the people in India and China were much more willing to try cultivated meat, actually almost double the percentage of the US respondents. So 30% of the US respondents said that they were extremely likely to buy cultivated meat. And actually in China, it was over 59%, and in India, 53%. So these are quite substantial numbers. And it's interesting indeed to look at the different reasons why people want to choose cultivated meat. I'm sorry for a little bit of background noise here. The garbage truck is going to pass by now. Can you still hear me? Because then I just continue to speak. Yes,
it's okay. You can still hear.
So, so for China, it's mostly nutritional value and health. And in India, it's more the sustainability angle. And we actually saw that in a more recent research as well, that China seems to be very focused on nutritional value and health. And as Ben said, it's actually interesting because for cultivated meat, you could actually look at additional health factors to include in cultivated meat. So I think it's very important to look at, well, where you're launching your cultivated meat product, to understand really well what customers are looking for, and then, then base your sales story around that. But there's definitely also a big need for more education around the topic, because I think if people understand better the way how cultivated meat is produced, it takes away a lot of the fear around it.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I think we should also start them when they're young, right? You know, not. Go ahead,
we're actually launching for the first alternative proteins course at NTU with a little bit of luck later this year. Brilliant. So I think it's very, very important to groom people young. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Sarah, I mean, it's hit the news. Everyone knows about your latest product. Tell us a little bit about how you are communicating this to the consumers in Singapore as well as in the greater region.
Sure. I think if we take a step back and look at the zoonotic disease outbreak, which has impacted the entire world, clearly there's increased consumer awareness that it could have been avoided had the food systems not been broken. And COVID-19 is just the latest of the zoonotic disease outbreaks, but there have been quite a few over the last 2 odd decades. There was SARS, there was MERS, there have been others. Each time we feel that the food ecosystem needs to be fixed, but this time around it's the consumers who are also demanding that, the way it has impacted lives across the world. There are people who have lost lives, lost their loved ones, lost livelihoods. It has impacted the world in so many ways that now people are themselves saying that we want to fix this broken ecosystem. And one clear step towards that is to move towards healthier ways of producing the food that we consume. And cultured meats is a step in that direction. So there's a lot of awareness that has automatically come in with people wanting to move towards better ways of consuming their food. Also, if we look at the antibiotics that go in the conventional food, maybe because of what's being fed into the feed, which is then being consumed by animals whom we then end up culling for our food. We end up consuming a lot more antibiotics. We then, subsequent to the culling of the animals, there's improper handling of the same food items, which sometimes leads to contamination, leads to other issues. All of that is avoided when it's done in a sustainable, better way in the cultured meats space. So I think there's a lot of awareness already, but yet there needs to be more awareness that needs to be created for the consumers, especially because whenever a new product comes, there's always some inertia or some hesitation to start with before people start enjoying it, picking it up. So clearly we need to do that. And of course, apart from that is the taste. The other day we were speaking with someone who mentioned that taste is the king and cost is the queen. So very clearly you need to focus on the taste, the king and the queen, so as to ensure that there's greater acceptance. And to become a mass product, to have a genuine impact in terms of ESG, in terms of the way it impacts our lives, the way it impacts our planet, we need to become a mass product, which would only happen when the pricing comes down.
Yeah, absolutely. Very insightful. Thank you, Sarah. I totally agree with you. There are actually more added benefits. I mean, a lot of us, when we do need antibiotics to fight deadly diseases, we want to make sure that it's effective. We really do not want to have resistance, antibiotic resistance, at such an early stage of of our evolution, right? Until someone finds another magic cure for diseases. And I think in Singapore we're also preparing for pandemic X, whatever that might be, whatever shape and form that it might come. But we do know that it's not going to stop with COVID-19, right? There is a space for everybody. It's just a question of being able to raise awareness. I love the idea of having the universities, be part of this exercise, and and spreading knowledge and information. But the price must be right, and the taste must be good. So that brings me to the second question, which is costs. Now, in Singapore, we're very, very careful about how we spend our money, especially when it comes to food, because you can get food at $3, $4, $5 nowadays in our hawker centers, right? I mean, it's literally, and you can pretty much eat all day long if you want to. And there's food all the time, and Singaporeans live to eat, basically. So now costs. Bioreactors in cultured medium are relatively expensive, right? So when do you anticipate these costs to come down and that cell-based or cultured meats become more commercially viable? Do you have any insights in that space? We'll start again with Saurabh, and then we'll go to Murta, and then to Professor Ben.
Sure. Perhaps before stepping into the specifics around the cost, I would like to give an example or an analogy from how cars have evolved. Maybe 100 years back or slightly more, there was a point in time when around the world it was cheaper to own a horse carriage or a horse, and cars were expensive. As technology grew, today it's a lot more affordable to have a car, and it's really difficult to own a horse carriage. Same we saw perhaps with the mobile phones. And all of us belong to that generation wherein we grew up with the landline phones. There was no concept of having a mobile phone. Once mobile phones were launched, we thought it was for the super rich. It was something that was unaffordable for the masses. And today it's the reverse. Very few of us have a landline or a fixed line phone at homes. Most of us have a mobile phone. So with technology, that typically happens. You have a cost curve wherein as the technology improves, as years pass by, you start reducing the costs, and then suddenly the acceptance increases. We saw that in cars, we saw that in mobile phones, and we anticipate something similar on the cultured meats side as well. To talk about specific numbers, as far as Just is concerned, we are already seeing some of those things unfold right in front of us. About 2.5 years back in 2018, our costs were significantly higher than what they are today. We have seen about 5 times increase in the cell density between then and now. We have seen about 6 times decrease in the media costs, and an overall about 40 times decrease in the total costs. What was earlier about $40 for me is now being manufactured in about $1. So clearly there's this very steep curve that we are seeing, and we only expect this to continue in the foreseeable future, which means that as the technology advances, as we increase the scale and size, we don't have any doubts that this is going to be competitive or perhaps even lower priced than the conventional meat. So yeah, super excited about what we are seeing as a possibility for the future.
Yes, brilliant. I think that's music to my ears. Murta, what do you think?
It's definitely impressive, Saurabh, and really good to hear, of course. So we actually launched a Techno economic assessment about 2 weeks ago. That is basically the first of its kind study that actually looks at how a large-scale cultivated meat plant, like how it would operate and what it would do with the costs. We also looked at the environment, which I can talk later about. But in the best, like the most positive modeled scenario, we think that, and we didn't do this research ourselves. We commissioned it with a Dutch company called CE Delft. So we weren't involved in the results. But this this research shows that by 2030, in the best scenario, the cost price, the production price of 1 kilo of cultivated meat could be as low as $5.66. And I have to say that this is the most positive scenario modeled. And also that this is the production price. It's not the price that people see on price tags in supermarkets or restaurants, right? It is also an unfinished product. It's like basically a cell slurry. It's not a finished product like the chicken bites of eJust. But this is obviously extremely exciting because suddenly it comes pretty close. Like it's not even a decade away that we might see these prices come to reality, and that would make a huge difference. So we're currently, like with alternative proteins, we're with about less than 1% of the total meat consumption, right? This is plant-based meats. So just put that in perspective. And so I spoke earlier this week with Elliot, who is our cultivated meat scientist in GFI US. And he said that if we, predictions that we could potentially have a 1% market share for cultivated meat by 2030, that would be incredibly awesome. But just putting it in perspective, that this is still like very, very small portion of the whole market, and obviously price will come down with scale. And there's also a huge opportunity for governments to pitch in here, because to get these prices down. So in these models, we have taken in, to get to the $5.66 a kilo, have taken in a very relaxed payback time for those facilities. Like one of such facility would cost actually $450 million. So it's serious money. And to be able to not pay that back in 4 years, but actually, for example, 20 or 30 years makes a huge difference, of course. And this is something that governments could really, really pitch in because private investors are maybe not so likely to do that, but governments who see the importance of the transition towards alternative proteins and cultivated meat is going to be a complete game changer. And I think it's very important. And governments know that if they want to achieve goals set out under the Paris Climate Agreement, they need to prioritize alternative proteins and make it part of their climate change policies. So yeah, that's a shout out to governments.
Yes, and I think peer pressure as well helps a little bit. So yes, some competition would help drive these costs out as well. Yeah. How about you, Ben? What do you think about costs, and maybe talk a little bit about time? I mean, everything's a factor of time, right? But do you think we will see a plate of cultured chicken rice on our supermarkets or hawker centers in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, fingers crossed. Yeah, I think some of the great points that have already been made is that you need a little bit of time and traction for these things to come onto the market and to actually gain traction. And then once you start having more and more companies bringing these products to market in different forms, then of course the price point starts to come down, the acceptance starts to go up, and people, you find your happy medium of where consumer want and price point meet. And that's really, I think, where a lot of attention is going in governments, but here in Asia and Singapore as well, in how do you support the companies working in this space so that they can bring these products to market, and that we can actually move towards, as you were saying, this, and as Myrta was saying, move towards more and more of these products actually coming onto the market. And so there is a balance there. And the Singapore food story efforts of the Singapore government, I think, are actually doing a lot in this space to help with a little bit of this competition, but also with the support to get the companies working on this idea and coming together. And it's not just the companies, it's also the academic institutes, the institutes of higher learning here in Singapore that are saying, okay, how do we bring our technologies to this plate, to this space. How, for instance, do research institutes like BTI at A-Star bring all of their bioprocessing technology to these sorts of problems? And we have a lot of parallel knowledge from biopharma here in Singapore that can actually be helped to look at cost reduction and process scale up. We have in institutes like the Singapore Institute for Food and Biotech Innovation, SIFBI here at A-Star, a lot of people looking at new fermentation approaches, new fermentation engineering approaches that can bring down the costs. So I think that's one of the great things about Singapore and how we look at R&D is that we're not just saying develop a product and then let it sit there and hope that it gets taken up. We're not just jumping on the bandwagon of the molecular and cell biologists and say come up with a new cultured meat. We have all of these related technologies around it and the scientists around it coming up with ways to improve the whole process, whether it's scale up and better fermentation processes that lower the cost, through to reducing regulatory barriers and things. So I think that's really where we have a lot of advantage in working together on the whole problem and bringing the costs down.
Yeah, it's all about that ecosystem, right? We always talk about that in this space. You know, we're gonna have to help each other because at the end of the day, you know, we're here to provide an alternative source of protein, right? So and as Saurabh pointed out, you know, you have the early adopters, and then you go into the main group of people, and then it will start plateauing a little bit and then coming back down again. So we're really at the beginning stage, right, with cultured meats, and we need as much support from governments, from institutions of higher learning, from laboratories, from consumers, you know, and so on and so forth. Yeah. It'll be great. And sessions like this are the ones that bring all of us together to ask these difficult questions. You're pretty popular, Myrta. You've got a couple of questions, so I'm going to go to the questions from the public. There are two questions directed at you, Myrta. If you could answer those. The first one is: did the study that you did 2 years ago, did it include an estimate of environmental impacts in terms of greenhouse gases from the bioreactor? And the second question is: how does the best case scenario of $5.66 per kilo for an unprocessed cell slurry compare to the cost equivalent of 1 kilogram of raw meat production? Would you mind answering those two questions, Myrta?
I definitely don't mind to answer the questions to the best of my knowledge. Can I? So first of all, this research was launched 2 weeks ago, not 2 years ago. Okay. So the first one is regarding carbon emissions, right? So actually so we also did a life cycle assessment, and very interesting, it shows that it reduces the environmental impact. So cultivated meat production reduces the environmental impact on all the levels that we tested it for. It was actually a Dutch standard by the Dutch government of 18 different pointers, and I'll share after I stop talking, I'll share a link to a webinar that Elliot gave earlier this morning, because he really goes into the details, and I think it's extremely insightful. But yeah, so it is actually, it depends on the energy source that we're using. If we're using renewable energy, actually for all the current meat that we're eating, so beef, pork, chicken, cultivated meat is making a smaller carbon footprint. If we're not using renewable energies, it will still be a smaller footprint for beef, but it's more or less on the same level of pork and chicken. And I say more or less because there's so many variables that come into play here. Also, like, where are we talking about? Because raising a chicken in the Netherlands is different from raising it in India. So there's a lot of variables. But once we use renewable energy, it's a better deal for any kind of conventional meat production. So I think that is super promising. And it goes also beyond this carbon footprint. It's like for air pollution and water pollution and land use, of course, it all scores much better. And just from the top of my head, cultivated chicken, since Rap is here in the panel as well, is 3.5 times more efficient if you look from feed to meat than conventional chicken. And that obviously like allows much more land to for reforestation or renewable energy sources, or just to grow more food for more people, because that's definitely what we need. And regarding the second question, I don't have a direct answer to that, but I'll share the link to both the webinar and then the actual reports to dig into it a little bit deeper to answer that question.
Thank you, Marita. I mean, very insightful. So you've busted that myth, right? Saurabh, you want to add to it?
Yeah, perhaps there was another data source that I was referring to. So of course, the Good Food Institute is a global leader in this sector, and they have done a lot of work. There are a few other guys as well who are doing some work. And there is this report that I had the opportunity to go through from Environmental Science and Technology. Depending upon how you look at the meat production and try and compare it with this cultured meats, they tried to do a comparison on 3 different metrics. One on greenhouse gas emission, second on the water consumption, and third on the land usage. On all 3, they found that cultured meats were significantly better or less resource intensive. In terms of the greenhouse gas emission, they found out that cultured meats was 78 to 96% lower than conventional meat. Of course, it depends where and various variables, which Mert highlighted earlier. In terms of land usage, this institute figured out that it's 99% lower land usage and between 82 to 96% lower water usage. So whichever metric you select, it clearly shows that cultured meats is significantly better for the planet.
Yeah, that's completely true. I mean, I have the numbers here, but it will be a bit boring if I read them out loud. But especially for beef, it's all high up in the 90 percentile of scoring better to have cultivated meat. And then, yeah, for chicken, it's obviously different, but from 17% for like the global warming to, let's see, 63% for land use, for example. So yeah, really good numbers. Very good.
So we've kind of busted that myth, right? So that's great. We got it out there, and everybody please remember, 23rd of March. You know, we've busted that myth that you know, cultured meats are equal, if not more pollutive than conventional meats. That's not true. Now we've got questions on food and safety, Professor. The first question is, what time horizon are the safety and health impact of cultured meats being evaluated in Singapore from a population health perspective? And there's another safety question here about, do you think that lab cultured meats and other alternative proteins require different or more stringent toxicology testing before submission for approval? Do you think current established protocols are sufficient, or do we need to rethink our current approval guidelines for cultured meats? So those are 2 questions for you, Prof.
Sure, all great questions. And I think they're the sort of questions that are on the top of a lot of people's minds when it comes to actually looking at these sorts of products. But what I always like to do is when talking about these sorts of things is go back and actually understand what we're really sort of talking about when we're talking about cultured meats. And effectively, we're talking about proteins that are sources of proteins that we can get naturally in our diet anyway. It's just another way of bringing them to the table. So we're not here with the current products and the types of products that are going on the market looking at making designer proteins that taste like chicken. We're looking at making a chicken protein. And so I think that a lot of it comes down to this concept of substantive equivalence as to understanding how and showing how these proteins are the same as the proteins that we're eating in a piece of chicken. That being said, yes, I acknowledge some of the comments around the approach and the process. And that's really where a lot of attention goes into the safety assessment of understanding these processes and how that can, and understanding the process with respect to the final product. And so I think one of the comments or some of the comments have been around things like use of excessive growth media or use of antibiotics, which you do use, as many of you know, do use in cell culture. And it's one of the things that in the past we have used fairly high levels on, because the last thing you want to do is get contamination in your cell culture systems. It leads to a real mess. But these are the sorts of things that everyone is actually looking at when they assess these products, and understanding the media and the components is very much a key factor. And a lot of work, both on the academic side, but also on the company side, is going into looking at how do we actually improve the medias that are being used? How do we improve our processes so we can limit levels of antibiotics, etc.? And when it comes, at the end of the day, what it comes down to, as with any food, is we're looking at it from a component assessment basis, and we're understanding what are the safe levels of these materials in the final product. And that is really how we then say, okay, have we got safe levels of a particular component? Are there materials that we don't, that we shouldn't be using in this process? And all of these points are actually taken into account when you're doing the safety assessment of these products. One of the questions also was on the timeline, and looking at how we assess novel foods, or any food really, from an additive. And I think this is one of the differences a little bit between food assessments and pharma. Typically, when we're looking at the assessment of a new food ingredient, we're doing it on the basis of understanding what would determine a lifetime exposure. And so we're assessing on the basis of an assumption of a 70-year life, someone eating this material over a long period. That being said, we're doing our assessment on the basis of data that has been generated in vitro systems or in animal systems that aren't clearly 70 years of a human's lifetime. So we make valued decisions on that data around what the data is telling us. And it's whether it's a novel food like a cultured meat or a food additive, it's exactly the same. How do you actually project that out long term? How do you monitor it? And that is something that is being discussed as to how to look at these foods over time, understand their exposure over time, particularly as we start to see trends increase and more of these products come on market. But equally, should we be doing that with the same sorts of foods? Should we be doing it with the meat that you just buy off the market? We know that changing diets and our total diet is the key thing. If we have too high levels of meat and we're just eating red meat all the time, okay, it's not the healthiest thing to do. So there are a lot of factors here that come into play. But effectively, if you think about it as these products that are coming onto the market, it's a protein that is naturally found in the diet. and the process of getting there is assessed quite rigorously, I think that there's the approaches that we have in place and are using at the moment are sufficient to be giving us a level of safety on these products coming to market.
Yeah, like, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of it to consider. It's not really there's no magic bullet, unfortunately. I mean, there was a question. Yes, Marta, please, go ahead.
I'm interrupted, keeping me to
not at all.
I'm sorry.
No,
but
not at all.
Just thought that it's interesting to also point out that we're not looking at just cultivated meat products per se as like finalized products, right? It could also be like cultivated fat that enhances plant-based meats, for example, which would make plant-based meats taste much better, and have a huge potential for environment, right? So, and then it would just be like a very small amount of actual cultivated meat or cultivated fat in this case that goes into a product. So yeah, I think that also influences like the timelines and considerations, etc., etc.
Yeah, and like a hybrid.
Like
a hybrid.
Yeah. And that goes to the point too of the concept of everything toxicological, that it's the dose that makes the poison. So yes, if you had megabucks and could feast out day in, day out on cultured meat until the price comes down, of course, it's not necessarily going to be the healthiest thing for you. But that would be the same as if you were feasting down on steak. It would probably be worse on a piece of steak, because you've got a lot of the other fats and things in there that maybe you don't have in some of the cultured meats on the market. So it's all relative, and it's all a matter of looking at it in respect to the total diet. That actually, one of the questions that I keep seeing pop up and people keep giving a thumbs up to is this one on red meat and IARCs. Labeling as a 2A carcinogen. And again, there you have to be very careful in how you're looking at the data and inferring what actually occurred there, because what really they were seeing in a lot of those studies was very high intakes of red meat and fats, which led to a unphysiological conditions in the lower gut, which perpetuated the likelihood or an increase in risk for tumorigenesis. So there's so many different factors here. You can't say something is labeled this way, cultured meats will be this way. They're looking and organizations like the SFA or authorities like the SFA and others are looking very much at the data that comes in and making solid assessments. And a big part of it is understanding the protein, how similar, is it the same? And if so, then great. If not, we need to understand that. But so far, all proteins they're from cell lines of animals. They're what you would eat if you're eating a cow or a chicken, a pig, whatever. And then it's looking at the components of the media and saying, okay, what's the safe level of these components? Many of them are nutrients, many of them are hormones and things that we have already present in cows and pigs and chickens or whatever. So
I noticed that consumers tend to be a bit more critical when it comes to alternative proteins, whether it is cultured or plant-based. They don't ask the same critical questions when it comes to conventional protein for reasons I cannot understand. I think it's very different standards probably, and also it's about awareness and it takes time. It takes time for people to be able to absorb the information and make that change. Saurabh, you have a question here, and the question is about quantities. You may choose not to answer this question, but the question is really about how much quantity of chicken have you got? And are you ramping up capacity?
Yes, the answer is we are ramping up capacity. We are currently manufacturing from a small bioreactor that we have at Singapore Polytechnic in Singapore. Of course, the starting cell culture comes from our California facility, but but we have grown it locally in Singapore. We intend to scale that up. We intend to have a 1,000-liter facility to start with, which would be producing thousands of pounds of product. And thereafter, we might have to increase it to something north of maybe even 50,000 liters, we feel. We haven't yet formed up the precise numbers, but clearly we are looking at increasing the capacity significantly.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested to know more about it. Yeah, I mean, the other question about is how do you export this? If SFA, having SFA provide the framework, the regulatory framework for the Singapore government, and now that we are a little bit ahead of the game, is this something that we can export to our, other countries, like the US, is this something that we could share as a best practice to other countries? Maybe Myrta, since you're from the Good Food Institute, maybe you'd like to start off to answer this question.
Yeah, well, we would love to, of course, and I think that is very important also to be able. It's great that Singapore has now approved the sales of the first cultivated meat product, but there's obviously a very small market here. We're with just 5 million, a little bit more people. So obviously for Saurabh to make the numbers work, he will need to sell in US, EU, China, India, right? Big countries with large populations. So it's definitely something that I think everybody is looking for, and that GFI across the globe is working towards. But we're not there yet. I spoke recently with SFA and understood that they're talking with New Zealand, the UK, let me think, 2 other countries I can't remember right now, but not to any of the Asian counterparts at least. And yeah, I mean, they're very open to do so actually and share best practices. So that's something for us to start working on as well. But yeah, it's obviously governments, they need to prioritize and be open for this and be open to learn from Singapore. But I think Singapore government is very happy to do so. And we're working towards that because that is gonna be, it's necessary to tip the skill over. We're not gonna be making any difference if just countries like Singapore and Israel, of course, who will soon follow, I assume, and other like small city-states that obviously have the food security issue very close to heart. But we need a bigger scale.
Absolutely, absolutely. Saurabh, what do you think? I mean, can we leverage our presence here in Singapore to maybe ASEAN? Do you think the other ASEAN countries would be interested to learn from us?
Absolutely, yes. I think in the ASEAN region, we are clearly looked at as a leader in terms of how we look at the space and the broader industry. Also globally, I think with some of the things that Singapore has been doing, we are emerging as a global hotbed, at least as far as innovation on the food side is concerned. There is, and it's just not just restricted to what Just is doing. I think compliment should also be given to others in the space who are doing great work. So whether it's a Turtle Tree or a Shopmeets or quite a lot of others in Singapore, they're all doing great work. And all of that means that there is increased awareness across the globe for the kind of environment that Singapore has created, which is promoting all this innovation and the entrepreneurship within the country.
Right. Good point. Again, collectively, I mean, you can't just eat chicken, right? You gotta eat, cultured chicken. You have to have cultured seafood. You have cultured milk, and so on and so on. And I'm pretty confident that whatever we do here in Singapore will be for the better of mankind, right? Not any particular country at all. It's for the better of the future, right? Of all of us. Benjamin, now you come from a research background, right? Do you think there'll be more cooperation amongst all the research centers? I know the Netherlands is a major center of excellence in this space. I see Canada, I see California also coming up in this space. Myrta talked about Israel as another very hot pot of research scientists there. What do you think? In our context, where you are right now, do you think there'll be more cooperation with all the research institutes around the world?
Yeah, just first off to Murphy, the other two countries actually were Canada and the US. So, that shows, I think, the collaboration and getting back a little bit to Singapore and how we do R&D, we realize that there's no, although obviously we have a big focus on looking at R&D to support Singapore and what's happening in Singapore, we realize that really to be successful and leaders in this in the research space, whether it's in cultured meat and foods or aerospace or whatever, we realize that we have to work and collaborate with others. And I think that that is something that Singapore really, as a country and as a research nation, are leaders in. That being said, across the whole research space, it's clear that there's been a big change in thinking. Gone are the times where, particularly in academics, and I actually come from industry before coming to A-Star, so I'm not as maybe academic as some people think I am, but gone are those days, at least when I was a young academic, of being very siloed and trying to do my own thing and develop out my own space, is that you need to be working and collaborating with others nowadays to be successful. We need to be working in this space. So obviously companies like Just or Memphis or Sheoak or whatever, they have their technologies, they have their particular products, but to bring these all to market, they need to work with each other and seed the market, look at the whole diet, the diet as a whole, look at how these products are influenced by consumers. You can't do that alone, and nor should we, because we're trying to meet global goals, global health goals for consumers, global environmental goals, and we're trying to do that responsibly as businesses and as researchers, as government authorities. And without that collective activity, I just don't think we'll get there. And that's really why one of the key reasons why the Singapore food story has developed out, and also why platforms like Fresh, the Future Ready Food Safety Hub, have come on board as a national platform. We're not here to say we can do everything in this space. What we're here to say is we want to work with everyone, yourselves, anyone on this call, companies bringing products to market, to help do what we can to make this a collective reality. And then when we do that, we will start solving some of these bigger problems together.
Yeah, excellent. I think we're pretty much coming to the end of our panel, unfortunately. I would love to go on and on with you guys. It's so much fun. Really, I'm sure this is not going to be the last panel that we'll be together on. Some parting words. Let's go with Saurabh first, and then Murta, and then Benjamin. If you had something that you want to share with our audience, what would you like them to remember from this panel today?
Perhaps two things. One, that with most new technologies, it takes time before people open up and start accepting and adopting them, before people are willing to make them a part of their daily lives. We saw that with cars, we saw that with phones, like I said earlier, we saw that with computers. We anticipate something similar to happen with meats. It's quite possible that when the next generation looks at us, they might feel that, hey, these people were not civilized enough, that they were growing animals only to kill them, when there were better ways to perhaps do this or to produce food. And I think we are at a point in time, we are at an inflection point in time wherein suddenly things are going to change towards a better and a more balanced way of consuming food.
Okay, thank you, Saurabh. Yeah, definitely resonate with you on that. Murta?
Yeah, so I want to point out, so there's 100-fold difference between private money going into the sector for R&D and public funding. So once more, let's get our governments, and Singapore is obviously a great example, but other governments around the world, to invest more money into open access R&D for alternative proteins, for cultivated meat, because there's like, we have a whole list of things coming out just out of the LCA and NTA, of things that knowledge gaps that we want to learn more about, but we need like serious money. And we all know that if governments prioritize like renewable energy, like vaccine development, it can really make a difference. It can really prioritize something and make a sector go much, much faster. So if governments see that and prioritize cultivated meats, R&D, I think that's going to be a major differentiator.
I think it's happening as we speak, Marta. So
yes.
I'm in this space, yeah. So I'm very confident that governments are stepping in, and even private sector money is coming into this space. So yeah, definitely happening, definitely happening. Benjamin?
Yeah, I think everything that's been said is I'm fully in agreement with it. It's all about coming together, whether that's through shared thinking or through shared finances, and it's very much contextualizing the issue and working towards the end goal. But I think also when we look at these new spaces, or by its very name and nature, novel foods, okay, these are things that we may not have been eating for the last 20 years. They may be new to our plates, but we have to look at them openly for what they are and assess them and understand them with good science-based approaches, and not cloud our views with incorrect thinking. Be brave, move forward, and know that everyone is working, whether it's industry, government, or researchers, to bring the right products to market in a safe and secure way.
Exactly. I like the analogy that Saurabh shared earlier about, you know, when we move from push cart horses to pull cart horses to and mobile phones. I mean, not too long ago, if you explained to me that, you know, I have to sell my combustion car or stop using combustion vehicles and move it to an EV, that would be very foreign to me, actually, honestly. But actually, not too long ago, I was in a blue SG car and I was so impressed, so impressed. And it actually cost me less money than taking a public Grab or you know. So that technology, that the electronic technology with the vehicle sector has really taken off very, very rapidly. And I see that the cultured meat sector would also happen. So thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, Saurabh, Benjamin, and Marta, for taking your precious time out to share your insights with our panel. And also thank you to SGInnovate, Brian and Jody, and for having all of us on your session. So now it's time to, unfortunately, to say goodbye, but I'm sure this is not the last time we'll see each other. I'm going to hand this panel or this session back to Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. Yeah, so once again, I would also like to thank all our speakers today for sharing their valuable insight and knowledge. For our audience today, do take note that we'll be sending out a post-event email with all the important information that you'll need, including a recording for this webinar sometime after this event. So please keep an eye out for that. So, and with that, we've come to the end of our webinar today. I hope you guys all learned something today. I know that I have. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. And on behalf of SGInnovate, I would like to wish all of you a great week ahead. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next event. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.